Hello, Johnny from Eurogamer here, and this is The Division 2. I've been playing this game a lot recently. I've already hit level cap, I'm churning through the end game, and I'm just starting to dip into the dark zone for the review on Eurogamer. My full verdict is yet to come, but since a bunch of you will be gearing up and heading into Washington D.C. yourselves, I thought it might be wise to bring you some tips for success in The Division 2. 12 of them to be precise, so let's get cracking. First, let's talk reloading. Apart from shooting, looting, and ducking behind cover, this is something you'll be doing the most as you strive to win back the capital in The Division 2. Some weapons reload delightfully quickly, while some, like LMGs, feature reloading animations that seem to last for weeks on end. You can shave time off your reloads, however, by quickly swapping weapons. Ignore the reload progress bar and watch your agent instead. The minute the magazine is in the gun, swap weapons and the ammo count will be automatically updated. Swap back and you're good to go. No belt feeding, no bolt pulling, just a fully functioning weapon. Animation cancelling like this may sound a bit fiddly, but trust me, it'll save you loads of time in the long run. Bear in mind though that this only works with weapons using a magazine, so if you're using a manually fed weapon like some of the marksman rifles, I'm afraid there's no way around it, you're just gonna have to thumb each round in like everybody else. As important as guns are to The Division 2, however, they're not the be-all and end-all. The skills you choose for your agent have an enormous impact on how they operate in the field, whether they make you great at initiating firefights, supporting your squad mates in order to keep them on their feet, or sealing off possible flanking routes so you can focus all your attention on a particular cluster of enemies. While they are super important, mind you, our next tip is not to worry too much about picking the right one straight off the bat. You'll very quickly get to unlock the rest, so if you pick up the Firefly drone and decide it's not for you, maybe because it keeps crashing into the nearest tree, then you'll be able to swap it out for something else pretty soon. That said, each skill has a number of variants, and picking these is a bit more important. When you unlock a skill, you get to choose one variant. You can make the Hive into an assault, repair, or revival tool, for example. If you want to unlock a new variant after your initial choice, it'll cost you 5 Shade Tech, which, at least in the early game, is much better used to unlock perks. Perks give you all sorts of goodies like extra grenades or armor packs, that all-important second weapon slot, and even new sights for your guns. So, when it comes to picking a new skill, don't worry about which one you pick, but do pay attention to the smaller details. You won't waste any Shade Tech and you'll have a much better time as a result, trust me. What you pick is entirely up to you, of course, but with the next 2 tips I'd like to make a couple of personal recommendations for skills that might have been overlooked, partly because their descriptions in the menu really undersell them. Firstly, the Chem Launcher's oxidizing variant. This is basically a purple gas that eats away at armour, and on first hearing about it, you might well do what I did and say, what's the point in that? Less than half of the enemies in the game will have armour, so that's kind of a waste of a skill slot. Oh, how wrong I was. Firstly, when this stuff eats through armour, it does it fast. Anyone who played the First Division will know how annoying it can be to chip away at a heavily armoured adversary, but this stuff goes through it at a rate of knots. And once the armour is gone, it continues to do damage, including if the target moves into cover, and it lasts for a surprisingly long time, meaning there are some armoured enemies you can just hit with the launcher and then not worry about. Honestly, the description makes it sound boring, but it is devastatingly good. Next, the Hive in general is a pretty great tool. All of the variants have their own uses, but the mini drones one is honestly phenomenal. Again, this is a case of the flavor text underselling the potency of the item. The game says these drones are used to distract your enemies, and technically I guess that's true, if by distract you in fact mean obliterate. The drones that live inside the Hive are as vicious as they are plentiful, so lobbing this one into a group of enemies is a great way to take out multiple hostiles at once. It's great for leveling the playing field at the start of a big engagement for that reason, though I've also been finding it really useful in terms of protecting my flanks. The enemies in the Division 2 are pretty good at testing the weak spots in your defences, so throwing the hive down on the most likely flanking route can come in really handy while you engage the enemies right in front of you. Talking of enemies rushing you, the next tip for success in the Division 2 concerns a bit of cheese you may remember from the first game, one that's still as delicious and effective in the sequel. There are some set pieces in the Division 2 story that are genuinely quite tricky. In my experience, these involve the really tanky, heavily armoured bosses who like nothing more than to rush you out of cover, where weaker enemies are free to try and put you down. In a squad of 4 that's less of a concern, but with smaller player numbers it can be a genuine irritation. Luckily you can turn the odds back in your favour by introducing a bottleneck. Look for the door you came through in order to start the engagement and head through that. Once you're out of the arena, the enemy's weight of numbers will count for a lot less. For one thing, they've got to actually move to your location, which for some can take quite a long time. There's also the fact that, frankly, the AI isn't always best equipped for this tactic, reducing your foes to a steady trickle. It's a cheeky strategy to be sure, but it's really effective and, let's face it, when you've had to start the same checkpoint half a dozen times, you could probably do with a bit of cheese. The next tip for budding Division agents concerns gear, because the system has been reworked for the Division 2 and, believe it or not, it's now all about wearing the right brands. See, aside from the stuff you encounter right near the start of the game, each piece of gear in the Division 2 has a manufacturer, basically a gear set, and you'll get rewarded for wearing more matching pieces. Look at a piece of gear in the menu and along the right hand side it'll show you a list of 3 perks. These perks are unlocked sequentially as you put more gear of the same type on. Some of these gear sets are focused on increasing critical hit chance and damage, for example, where others focus on headshots and marksman rifle damage. These builds can really help you specialise your agent once you've worked out what weapons you prefer, and most interestingly they make choosing your equipment more than just looking for better base stats. I found myself quite regularly hanging on to pieces of gear despite having more powerful stuff because I preferred to keep the trait rather than switch to a gear manufacturer that didn't really do anything for me. It makes things a bit fiddly and definitely more time consuming, but pay attention to your gear manufacturer and I promise it'll be worth it. While we're talking about gear, now's a good time to talk about weapon mods, as these are also different for the Division 2. As in the first game, guns come with a number of slots you can fill with mods in order to tweak your weapon stats. However, there's now a downside in that each weapon mod you equip has a negative trait as well as a positive one. A mod might add 20% stability at the cost of 10% accuracy, for example, or another might increase a weapon's effective range while making the reload time longer. The downsides to each mod are rarely catastrophic, but it does mean there's more to think about now when you're modding a weapon. I'm quite fond of an LMG, for example, but there was a point at which most of the mods I had available was slowing my reload speed, and, with all of them combined, the cumulative effect was too much. I ended up not equipping them all and looking for other mods to source instead. It's an interesting system, one I suspect not all fans will be happy about, but it's worth taking the time to get your head around either way. Our next tip also concerns gear, specifically what to do with all that stuff you no longer have a use for. As in the first game, you can deconstruct gear for crafting materials, or you can flog it to vendors for cash, but you should be careful not to do this too much in the sequel, because there are projects to think of. Projects are available in the base of operations and from friendly strongholds like the campus or the theatre. Each project has a list of requirements for you to fulfill. Some of these might be taking out elite enemies from a particular faction or rescuing civilians in one of the city's districts. Quite often though, these projects require you to donate gear. 3 pairs of gloves, for example, or a couple of holsters. The gear level of what you donate doesn't matter, all that counts is that you fork it over. And the thing is, projects are a great way to get XP and other rewards. Completing projects is swift work, but the XP payout is pretty big, so if you're looking for a quick way to gain a level or two, you could do far worse than to check in with the projects table and throw them a bunch of gear you don't want anymore. I mean, it's certainly more lucrative than deconstructing a bunch of greens for not many crafting materials. Make the projects table part of your rounds whenever you visit the base of operations or other strongholds, and you won't regret it. Talking of finding XP in friendly places, control points are also a great way to bag yourself some easy XP. You'll find control points littered about the city, identifiable by a flag icon on the map. In order to take one, you need to go there, send up a flare to call in friendly reinforcements, take out the enemy, and then defend it from their reinforcements. Once you've done that, you'll get a decent chunk of XP, but it'll also unlock a friendly NPC, effectively the site coordinator for that control point. Check in with them and they'll tell you what supplies they need, whether that be food, water, building stuff, or all three. You'll be gathering all three of these items in spades as you explore the world, so fork them over to the coordinator and you'll get a surprisingly big XP payout. Again, free XP for getting rid of stuff you don't really need. It's really useful. There are just 2 tips left on our little list, and the next is to explore underground whenever you get the chance. Look on the map and you'll see a bunch of little yellow circles, each with a black arrow pointing down at the centre. These are underground entrances and they are well worth checking out. Along with a bunch of loot, some of it locked away behind a door you'll need to find a way to open, these underground portions of the game also feature innocent looking grey boxes on the wall. These boxes contain keys from each of the game's 3 factions, that's the Hyenas, the True Sons, and the Outcasts. On missions, you can often find a box requiring 1 or more of these keys, and the loot inside is always pretty good, so nip underground and snatch up these keys whenever you get the chance. I think I only encountered enemies once during one of these trips, and that was when we sort of blundered into a connecting facility. So basically these are really easy to tackle, and to be honest, it's nice to do something with a bit more of a relaxed pace every once in a while. And finally, our last tip for Division 2 players is to explore in general, especially during missions. There's a lot more hidden loot in the Division 2, tucked away in a really easily overlooked corner or hidden behind a bunch of mannequins, and by way of rewarding those players who take the time to look more thoroughly, it's often more substantial than the stuff that's just plonked in your path. Take the time to look in unlikely places and you will definitely be rewarded. And there you have it, 12 tips for success in the Division 2. I hope you found them interesting. I'll be covering the Division 2 more in the coming days, including my full review on Eurogamer.net, so keep your eyes peeled for more. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, there are loads more on the channel for you to watch, so do give one of those a click. Do like, subscribe and ring that bell icon for plenty more from Eurogamer, but most importantly, thank you very much for watching and have a lovely day.